Christian, next CYInterview covering Las Vegas and the world. If you haven't already, please hit the like button below and please hit the subscribe button below to keep up with everything we have going on here at CYInterview in Las Vegas and beyond. We greatly appreciate it. Today we're going to revisit a CYInterview from 2015 with great Elvis impersonator and musician Steve Connolly. At the time, he was performing his ongoing residency Spirit of the King at the Four Queens Hotel and Casino. Today, Steve Connolly is still in downtown Las Vegas performing at Notoriety Live in 2025. Here is our CYInterview from 2015 with Elvis impersonator Steve Connolly, who has performed thousands of shows as Elvis Presley.
You're on CYInterview.
I'm Chris Shandick. We're down here at the Four Queens Hotel on Fremont Street with arguably the most accomplished Elvis impersonator in Las Vegas and maybe the entire world's history. Steve Connolly, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I feel great. Feel good. Great show tonight, so I'm in a good mood.
Where does the Elvis inspiration come from originally?
Well, if I had to say where does it come from originally, I'd say my mother. You know, she was a big Elvis fan, and I can remember her talking about Elvis and making us watch all the Elvis movies. And my mom was a diehard, crazed Elvis fan. And repeats of the 68 comeback or repeats of Elvis from Hawaii. Whenever Elvis was on, Elvis is on, she'd bookmark it in the TV guide. So at a very young age, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I was indoctrinated by my mom.
You've done over, I believe, 4,000 of these performances at this point, or is it more than that?
More than that, actually. I've done over 5,000. I know my press is saying 4,500 public shows, ticketed shows, but that was from 2012. So I'm actually around over 5,000 public shows, and as far as corporate events, well over, I broke 1,000 corporate events. These are what you call private parties, working for Fortune 500 companies, that kind of thing. So there's well over 1,000 of those, and then so it's closing in on over 5,500 performances.
How many hours, how many years have you...
Vegas. That's just Vegas. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No problem. It's understandable as always. We always like the added information. So as I was saying to you, how many hours, how many years have you studied Elvis to get it all down correctly?
Well, I've been singing and playing since I was 15 on stage. Been performing on stage since I was a kid, and in rock bands, heavy metal bands, and covering all kinds of music. And then, but my mother again said, "Why don't you do an Elvis song? You got to do an Elvis song." So I started doing originally Blue Suede Shoes. Then I added Jailhouse Rock and Heartbreak Hotel, and they became staples even in my heavy metal bands. So I'd be in a show where I'd be singing a Def Leppard song or a Motley Crue song. In fact, I have to say this, I did Jailhouse Rock because Motley Crue did it. And I was originally doing a Motley Crue version, which I'll stand back from the mic and go, "One to the party in the county jail." And so it was kind of cool, but then I decided I couldn't sing that every night. It was killing my throat. So I just did more, I just went back and copied Elvis's version. And it still went over great. And but there were other, I saw Freddie Mercury do Jailhouse Rock. I saw Cher do Jailhouse Rock. So that, in every club I ever played, the Elvis stuff went over great. It didn't matter. There was never, it just worked. I did a solo gig. This was kind of a earth-changing moment. I used to play these open mic nights, and you'd be in a band, and we're all young guys. And so I did this gig where I sat with my acoustic guitar and started playing original songs. But it was St. Patrick's Day. The place was packed, shoulder to shoulder, just drinking, everybody going crazy, and I'm playing like my ballad original song, and I'm going nowhere, all right? And I was supposed, the producer guy said, "I need a segue while we change acts. Can you sit there with your acoustic guitar and play some tunes for 15 minutes?" So when I agreed to it, I didn't realize I would be with this drunken, insane crowd. So I didn't have the crowd, so I switched and did did Heartbreak Hotel, and the crowd shut up and started going nuts. And then I did Blue Suede Shoes. So I scrapped my originals, and I went with 2 Elvis songs, and I won over the crowd and got a lot of great accolades at that time from all the other bands, and it was a great moment. So that was one of those times where I realized that Elvis worked. It didn't matter what the environment. This was like St. Patrick's Day, green beer, crazy people, just outside of Boston. And Heartbreak Hotel, Blue Suede Shoes saved my life. from getting the hook.
Bill Clinton, Steven Tyler, Tom Jones, among others, have given you great endorsements, including as well Donald Trump. What have those things meant to you?
Well, they've meant an awful lot, and it's hard to differentiate between them on some levels. But I'll say this: when Steve Tyler, I had been at the MGM, I'd probably done maybe 1,500 performances at the MGM at the time when I met Steve Tyler, and he came up to me after the show and he grabbed me. He's about your size, and started squeezing my shoulders, and he said, and this is after the show, big huge crowd, the first guy in line to tell me, because I used to do a meet and greet just like you saw here, right? And he's going, that was great, man, I cut my teeth on Elvis, man, you were amazing. And he's saying, and I'm looking at him and I'm going, you're Steve Tyler. I paid to see Steve Tyler 17 times before this moment. I hitchhiked to see Steve Tyler twice. What am I saying? Twice. I probably hitchhiked 6 times to see Aerosmith. I mean, Aerosmith's like the greatest thing on earth to me, and now I have Steven Tyler telling me I'm great. So I said to him, is it possible that, because there's a big line and people are huffing and puffing because they want to take a picture with me, and he's taking up the time. You just witnessed some of it, right? But this was MGM, so it was a lot bigger. And I said, I got a throwaway camera on stage. Is there any way I could, I'll run on stage now, grab the camera, and we take a quick picture? And he said, oh, no. You sign these autographs, you take care of these people. And he said, and I'll just wait right here. I'll just step back and I'll wait right here. And I said, are you kidding me? No, I mean, seriously, I don't want to hold you up. And he said, no, this is cool. I want to watch you do this. So he steps back over here, and I sign about 25, 30 autographs as quick as possible. You saw me out here. I take time with everybody. But this day, I was like, Steve Connolly, Steve. And then I ended up going over and talking to him for over an hour about all kinds of stuff. Aerosmith owned a club in Boston called Mamakins, which was one of my first big Elvis gigs, and we sold it out. And it was very frightening too, because the club owner said Elvis wouldn't go over. And there's a big story behind that, Steve Tyler. I don't want to go into it all if we had more time. But the Steve Tyler one, to answer your question, was monumental. As a kid who grew up, my big reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I'm Aerosmith, Kiss, going to see these guys live, and to think that's what I want to do. And they're the people that made me say, if I can do anything, that's what I want to do. And then to have that guy come up to you and tell you you're doing a great job. And you can quote this, he said, I cut my teeth on Elvis. And that's not something everybody says. So it stuck in my head. And, that was a great experience. And I have more. Joe Perry came to brought his tour bus to my show. And Matt, anyway, your other question was Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, which are also huge. I've had a ton of celebrities. So it's hard. I don't want to knock, especially when I was at MGM, Kenny Loggins, Dennis Miller 3 times coming to my show. And, the Donald Trump one was huge too, because he said, I don't like Elvis impersonators. And you wouldn't have Bill Clinton recommended me to Donald Trump. That's how I got that gig, And he said, if it wasn't for Bill Clinton, he said, and I said, I know, I saw you on Larry King say, if life were fair, Elvis would be alive and all the impersonators would be dead. And he laughed and said, oh, you saw that? And he said, you changed my mind. He just, all these accolades. Now, I did have a great gig. When I played for Donald Trump, $100,000 sound system, 27-piece orchestra. It really was, even when I was playing, I was going, wow, this sounds good. Every note I was singing was coming through. It was not that what you saw here was this, but the other thing that moved me the most was Bill Clinton, because that one I went home and wrote it all down. A lot of other things, stories, I made little notes, but I wrote an essay on the time I met Bill Clinton, because it was crazy. I did a gig at it was for his stepfather, his birthday party, and I'm looking out at the crowd and I go, this is Bill Clinton, this is the president, and he's probably about from here to that post away from me, that post over there, and you're performing and the president is watching me perform. And then after after the set, he came up and he said, he put his arm around me, and he's about 6'3", 6'4", and Hank Cartwright, who was the host of the party, he said, I just love Elvis. I love Elvis. Is there any way I could get you to go back on stage and do another set? And I looked at him and I said, yes, sir, Mr. President. And it was so, he's got his arm around me and he's asking me, will I go back on stage? What would you say? Yes, sir. And, there's all these Secret Service guys around. There's a ton of information about that story, too, because even before I performed, I can't go into it all. We're running out of time. I could spend 2 hours on Bill Clinton. But so I did. I got back on stage. And then after I got off stage, Bill Clinton came over to me. He was, it was a very intimate, maybe 75 people. And we talked for about 15 minutes about music. And he talked about when I played the saxophone, I used to try to figure out all the harmony parts that the Jordanaires sang. So they would be playing sevenths and ninths, and I would make sure I worked out each harmony. And he was really into Elvis music, and he said, and when the harmonies that you did, the vocal, everything was perfect. And he couldn't be more complimentary. And of course, at that same event, I'm dancing on tables, I'm leaping around, trying to avoid getting hit by ceiling fans. And he talked about all of that, the craziness too, So I had the interesting thing with Bill Clinton, the conversation was very musical. We talked about Frank Sinatra. It was like talking to another musician about what it is that we do, and the fact that you have to negotiate the crowd and still hit the right notes. So the Bill Clinton one, actually I went home, did a letter, I sent the letter to Bill, and I got back 2 autographed 8x10 pictures too. Even a note that it may, that he'll keep that letter, and it really meant a lot to him, because I sent the letter to my mother, and I sent a letter to my mother that I met the president, and then I sent a copy of that letter that I sent to my mother to him, and that got me, and it's a series of people how it ended up getting back to me, so it was great. That's pretty good, right?
Better than most. There's no denying that. Thank you for the story. Finally, after 5,000 of these performances, what do you still want to accomplish with this?
Well, did I say it here at the end of the show? One of the things I did, the idea that if I can bring joy and happiness into people's lives one song at a time, that is, and do what I do. I was in the 2nd grade. I'm at a Catholic school, looking out the window, daydreaming. It was raining, and a nun came over and said, Mr. Connolly, you paying attention? And she asked me that question. I answered the question correctly. It's good to know. But then she said, no, I thought you were daydreaming. She said something, and I said, well, you know what you're going to be when you grow up? I said, well, I'm either going to be an actor, a musician, or an artist, right? And I don't really need to worry too much about whatever that was. I think it was geography, actually. And, I'll always know wherever I am. Why do I need to know geography? I just have to know where I am. And so in the 2nd grade, I made a definitive declaration that this is what I'm going to do. So Elvis gives me the opportunity, and I've been in other bands and so many different things over a short period of my life before the Elvis thing, that the idea that I'm doing what I love to do. And I paint. I've actually literally painted this on stage while singing, and that was a great thing. I've done it. I was working at a casino in Palm Springs, 6 shows a week for 6 months, and I painted these. This is painted in like 8 minutes. This one here was longer. This 15 minutes to paint the microphone. This was at a convention center gig. It was a little bit different. So, and this one was a little longer. This is more like a 25-minute painting. This one literally painted in 8 minutes in a 15-minute segment. I play 15 minutes worth of music, the painting's done, and I'm dancing and kicking, and I did that, 6 times a week for 6 months in Palm Springs, and that was a great experience. I integrated, and I've been working on this, trying to speed paint and trying to integrate my painting, because I've painted God on the ceiling of a church. I went to art school. I was a painter, and I made my living as an illustrator, commercial artist, at the same time as singing. But then the Elvis career just kind of took off, and I didn't need to do both. But then a few years ago, I started to integrate the painting back into my life. I did a whole series. I did 12 paintings of Elvis in ways that you haven't seen him before. I mentioned the boxing painting, and I did a painting with Elvis and Martin Luther King and Kennedy, and just to try to illustrate things about Elvis that people don't know, and I put them into these paintings. And so the speed painting thing happened kind of as an accident. I was trying to drum up business for an art gallery. I had 9 of my paintings in the Southern Nevada Center for the Arts, and we have a thing here in Vegas called First Friday, and At first Friday of every month, people come down and visit about 30, 40 art galleries in Vegas. And everybody's vying for the attention of these people, which is roughly, lately it's been about 10,000 people. But at the time when I was doing this, it'd be about 5,000 people. They block the streets off. They have a block party. And anyway, I started pushing my PA system outside and painting, saying, come on to our art gallery. And that kind of led to this crazy painting thing.
Well, hopefully people will come here in Las Vegas to come see you at the Four Queens. And closing, a little Elvis for us, Mr. Connolly?
You want to hear a little Elvis?
Yes.
Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. Don't let me go. Grab me, squeeze me. Come on down to the Four Queens and see the show, baby. Four Queens Hotel and Casino, Las Vegas.
Mr. Connolly, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
For CY Interview, I'm Chris Yantek.